pass on uh, all the information you would need. The slides that are given to you are just a guide to further reading. The idea is have an idea of virtually all you need to cover. And as you go through the slides, these are very applied courses. You might need to do further studies. There are several links in the slides. Go into the links to study more. When a concept is introduced, look at local examples, look at international best practices, and read more. I would also encourage you to also watch a couple of videos on these areas, especially on YouTube. They are very exciting videos. I think at the end of this uh, lecture series, I will send a couple of videos that you would look. I would also suggest that the class groups itself into several groups to discuss these things. These concepts are easier understood when discussions happen among peers. From the little interactions I've had yesterday, there are a few experienced people in these areas, and you would gain a lot from them. But the idea is just to open our minds to see the world, the environment differently. So that would be my take for this. I've had several interactions with a few people who did this course last year, and one of the most exciting things for them, especially with the way we're running our current system of lectures, is you probably won't have enough time to go through these materials. They are very bulky materials and all of that. But if you don't see this degree as, yes, I'm just getting an additional degree for work, but this is an area I want to be an expert in. If you go through the materials as a self-study guide at your pace, even after your exams, you will be able to deepen your understanding and knowledge. And to be frank with you, the sky is your limit if you choose to go into study of the environment, because that's where the world is moving towards in terms of how we can conserve environment. Like we've always said, we are way, way behind other parts of the world. But as we move in, year after, you would see how relevant careers in these areas will become. And it's the experts, it's not those with necessarily the certifications or the certificates that will be picked up. It's how much you know about this area and how much you care that would finally establish us. Okay. I'm still having some. Okay. So would so we'll continue our lectures with the situ conservation approaches. Yesterday we dealt with the ex situ conservation approaches, creating ecosystems that involves for animals like zoos, for plants like botanical gardens, but in this case, that is outside their natural habitat. But for the Okay, can you see my slides? Okay, yeah.
Yes, Doc.
Yes, we have seen it.
Okay. So for the situ conservation and approach, we're dealing with natural habitat. This particular graph here or chart shows the total area designated as total area that is protected in the world as we speak. The green one shows us roughly about 18 million cumulative terrestrial area protected. And then we have a lower value for marine area, the total marine area. And about 80% of what we have here has been established since 1962. So what we need to understand from this is a fairly recent development in terms of the world deciding that we need to create or conserve some areas to be able to prevent extinction or threats to species that are threatened. 15% of land, 10% of terrestrial waters. At the moment, we have 3% globally. But if we really want to do as much as we can, we actually need 20% of territorial waters. Marine protection is up by 300% in the last decade. So in the last 10 years, we've done a lot in terms of marine protected areas. We have a look at the worlds with the highest protection areas, and Seychelles comes first, and that's interesting. It's an African country. We have New Caledonia. Seychelles, it's I think the first country in Africa as far as per capita income is concerned. So they are really wealthy. I remember the IPES team went on a training in Seychelles sometime last year, and the typical rooms for a hotel they could stay was about $200 a night. That's to let you know how much tourism. It's a beautiful island, but that's what tourism has done for them, and you wouldn't be surprised that while the world is interested in visiting a country like Seychelles, we have several other countries there. We have Zambia as number 11 in Africa, and then Nigeria is 111. There are different kinds of classification that the IUCN has done in terms of level of protection from human disturbance. There are about 7 categories here. Category 1A, strict nature reserve. Strictly, so the area that is designated, category 1A, is to protect biodiversity and possibly geological and landform features where human visitation, use of impacts are strictly controlled and limited to ensure protection of the conservation values. These sort of areas become a reference point for scientific research and monitoring strictly prohibited. Category 1B, wilderness area. These areas are usually large, unmodified, or slightly modified. So in this case, they are a bit modified compared to the nature reserve. They retain their natural character and influence without permanent or significant human habitation, which are protected and managed so as to preserve the natural condition. Category 2, we have national parks. We have a couple of them in Nigeria, the Calabar National Park. I think the Yankari Game Reserve should be in Category A, but I think a part of the Yankari Game Reserve would also form a national park. Protected areas are large natural or near natural areas set aside to protect large-scale ecological processes along with the complement of species and ecosystems characteristics of the area. And they also provide a foundation for environmental and culturally compatible spiritual, scientific, recreational, and visitor opportunities. So typically, the Yankari Game Reserve is a place you have the Yankari Game Resort with the Wiki Warm Spring. So you can imagine a warm spring, that is actually warm from the rock, and you could that has been preserved. I don't know what has become of it in the last 10 years, but at some point I remember the governor, I think between 2003 and 2007, Muazu, really did a lot of renovations there, and it was coming up until we had this crisis of Boko Haram, and I doubt if many people would be comfortable going that way, but it's more of a national park with occasional visits. But beyond the park, you have a natural reserve. As students in the University of Jos, there was virtually no year we were not traveling to Yankari Game Reserve, and you could go on the safari, see lions and a couple of other animals. Category 3 are national monument features. Protected areas are set aside to protect a specific natural monument, which can be a landform, a seamount, submarine cavern, geological features such as cave, or even a living feature such as ancient grove. They are generally quite small protected areas and often have high visitor value. If I want to think of this now, think of something like the Batu Caves in Kuala Lumpur, where you have lots of bats. At the same time, they have a national monument for, I think, Further Buddhism, and it has a large amount of visitors every year. Category 5 is a protected area where the interaction of people and nature over time has produced an area of distinct character with significant ecological, biological, cultural, and scenic value, where safeguarding the integrity of this interaction is vital to protecting and sustaining the area and its associated nature and conservation and other values. I think around Nigeria, you could have several places that are beautiful landscape that should be preserved. If I want to think now, if you've traveled to Jos, the forest area, where they call forests, you have a large expanse of landscape that is just beautiful. Travel around Nigeria also gives you that sort of experience if we are able to continue. But these areas we're talking of, I think sometime last year or the Jos, part of forest is gone. You can see way into the land because either there is felling of trees or fire, and all of that. So we're losing a lot of that. And then we have category 6, which is protected areas associated with culture and all of that. The first 5 are truly protected area. They are, while the others are priority shared to a lesser or greater extent with some sort of economic activity. The in-situ conservation is the most effective way to preserve biodiversity because you are providing naturally occurring habitats. They are not caged. Many of the species are not caged. That is their normal environment that contains all the need to be healthy and an intact ecosystem. And this is done by establishing individual protected areas and then possibly creating a network of protected areas. So you have countries, the way they who that do these sort of things, they have a network of protected areas that are mostly interconnected. And it also involves a lot of management. You need to manage these areas. And how are these established? And we would talk about 2 broad approaches: legislation, where governments at both national and regional. Here in Nigeria, we can say at the level of the national government and at the level of the state governments, working together by having a legislation. Then we can also have people who would purchase a large amount of land as maybe individuals or as organizations that are with strong emphasis on conservation. Actions of indigenous people and traditional societies, and then research organization. For indigenous people, this I would say is one of the most profound examples of a people that preserve their community. A few years ago, we went for a fellowship in the US and in Arizona, to be specific. And because we were Africans, the fellowship decided to give us a chance to spend an entire day with the Navajo indigenous people in Arizona. And it was a very exciting time. We traveled over 3 hours to the reservation. You would have heard the story of the Native Americans, how they were conquered, but at some point, the US, Canada, and a few other countries were able to return a significant part of their lands to them. They have their own laws, they have their own police, even though they are in the United States. And these people have the Navajo, and it's across the entire North America, where you have them decide on their own to say we are keeping our culture, we are keeping our habitat intact. And everyone knows most of these reservations have a huge amount of minerals, a huge amount of blood. But one of the biggest interactions for us, and the shock was, the community hosted us and they told us, look, they have their own kind of agriculture. The land they are sitting on, no family is allowed to farm more than what they need to eat. And so it's not like capitalism where you say, I want to do business, this is what I want to do. And virtually all the resources are being conserved. We're giving some corn there, if I remember. And they are so particular that even the things they grow don't leave the community. They have their own traditional system of agriculture. And the whole idea is we would preserve our environment, will preserve our land for the future. They don't believe in capitalism. And they have decided, but a lot of those Indians who don't believe in that have left that community and moved into the wider America. They have their hospitals and clinics, merge it with traditional practice, and they are choosing to live their lives on their terms. So that's one area in terms of, in their own case, is land allocation, not purchase. Sometimes multiple organizations can come together to create such areas, even in between countries. And the key questions we need to ask when we're establishing these sorts of protected areas is how much human activity is permissible, what kind? Because the more you have unlimited human disturbance, the more effect it has on the range of biodiversity to be preserved. And so to create new protected areas, you need to identify your priorities for the conservation. Are you talking of the habitat? Are you talking of specific species? Are you looking at designing a completely new protected area? Or are you thinking of determining the areas that should be protected, or link new protected areas to existing conservation network? What should you prioritize? What should be protected? Some of the constraints to areas that can be protected, land and other resources are limited. So there's a lot of pressure to exploit land for economic gain. And then, of course, it might not be a priority for governments to set aside that large amount or huge amount of money for conservation, which is quite a challenge that we in Africa have. The Western world has taken advantage of most of the world by colonialism, built whatever it needed to build, and it now looks like they have more than enough to be able to go into this. Somewhere in Nigeria, we're still struggling how we can put 2% of our budget to education, how much is going into healthcare. So you would have that sort of limitations. So you need to determine the highest priorities, and the three of them will be distinctiveness in terms of the ecosystem you are looking at. You think of ecosystems that have multiple endemic or rare species, not just one. So you are looking at how you preserve a large number of endemic species, only species in family or genetically unique, or other unusual attributes. For example, if it's a vegetation and it's a beautiful vegetation, you are also looking at that. How distinct is it? Vulnerability. The species you have an interest in, is it in danger of extinction? In terms of utility, you'll be talking of species with current or likely future value to humanity. So if you identify a plant or an animal, and you think that is going to be valuable, you could decide to base your choice in terms of ranking on that. Species of cultural significance. An example there is tigers that have a significance to the Indians. You can design a protected area because of that. An ecosystem of major economic value. This is also an interesting place. You look at coastal wetlands over dry scrublands. So if you have choices between those two, and you feel that having developed maybe a corridor that is really amazing to view and for you to earn money from, that can be a choice. in terms of how you rank your priorities. These are case studies. The Komodo dragon, which is the largest lizard in the world, somewhere in Indonesia, is endangered because it occurs on only a few small islands. And of course, when it comes to that, it attracts a lot of visitors from across the world. So it is now protected and it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So to determine which areas should be protected, you can approach it from a species approach, the ecosystem approach, the hotspots approach, and the wilderness area approach. These are the four different approaches you could take in terms of protecting species. You select areas on the basis of species living there. That is a species approach. Because at the end of the day, we are talking of limited funds. We're talking of several challenges. So what would be your strategy or your approach? You could say, okay, because this species is endangered, it is rare, it's culturally significant, I am deciding on conserving this particular area because of that particular species. And so an example would be certain types of owls. You protect the indicator species, you ensure that it has the right condition and that same ecosystem that supports it to survive. That would be the approach. There are several the National Park Service of Nigeria, South African national parks, and the Botswana Department of Wildlife and National Parks. So basically, the species approach is about species. You capture public attention, and it will have symbolic value in terms of ecotourism. The ecosystem approach is to target an ecosystem rather than a species, as they contain better value. So in this case, you're not looking at a particular animal, but you're looking at an ecosystem that supports maybe several species. So it's easier to demonstrate value to an ecosystem than a single species because you can imagine justifying to a population that is because you are interested in one bird or one owl that you are spending this amount of money on. So for policymakers, it's easier for you to say, oh, this particular ecosystem, the rainforest is being destroyed. We have large animals, we have plants that have values. And so we want to spend our money on protecting this while looking at the wider picture. It's easier to sell. So it captures representatives of as many types of ecosystem as possible. And so that is an approach you could use, especially where funds are a challenge. Maybe for the Western world, they can decide to shut down an entire island for the Komodo lizard, but in a place like Africa, we'll probably be more interested in saying, oh, we want to help the environment by preserving this forest, and by preserving the forest, you also have species that are being provided. So that's an approach you could look at. The hot spots approach and wilderness approach are other areas, areas where greater species diversity exists or diversity in key indicator species. So again, this is close to the ecosystem, but in this area now, in this approach now, the choice is based on having a large diversity in species as a defense for that. An example with diversity in flowering plants. It can also have diversity in mosses. So you have different objectives being met. And that's a hotspot is a place where you congregate, so that can be an approach as well. Wilderness areas, that's another approach, is to have large land blocks minimally impacted by human activity with low human populations and low development risks. These are perhaps the places where large mammals can survive in the West. There can be low vegetation densities at deserts and tropical rainforests. The danger with that is population can rise in those areas because they are attractive to landless people. So if you have a wilderness area you feel you are trying to use as a protected area and there are no human activities there, no development, then you are inviting people who don't have land, people who want to graze, people who have other options to lay claim to that. Criminal activities can also begin to happen there. Okay, in terms of designing a biodiversity protection reserve, you should avoid overly simplistic generalized guidelines when designing protected areas. Every situation requires individual consideration. The point is, yes, I want to have a natural park. Oh, I want to have this. And you don't have what the guidelines are. What are your objectives? What is unique to this particular area? It definitely would fail from studies and data. And so we have to consider four different things, and they're represented by for the 4 R's. Representation. They should contain as many aspects of biodiversity as possible in terms of species, in terms of populations, in terms of the right habitats. You should have proper representation when you are designing or thinking of having a reserve, not just generalized. There must be sufficiently large to maintain all aspects of biodiversity for a foreseeable future. They should also not be redundant. They must include enough numbers to justify why we are doing this and to ensure long-term existence in the face of future uncertainties. So it's not enough for you to decide maybe because you are governor of a state, you decide this is where I want to site this when stakeholders haven't decided on that. Maybe a few years down the line, someone else will come in and feel that this isn't the right approach and it might not be sustainable. Or look at all the long-term factors that could affect it. So make sure you design something that will not be redundant in a few years or in the future. And then the reality is that you must have sufficient funds, and not just funds, but a political will to acquire the lands, to manage, and management involves a lot of monitoring. And so this is more practical questions in terms of the options we might have. In the case of a river, you have an ecosystem that is partially protected. You can see from the pictures on the right-hand side where the vegetation seems to be doing better because the ecosystem is completely protected. When you have a small reserve, you should be thinking of a better option where you have a larger reserve. Fragmented reserve, these are virtually unplanned. The other option would be having an unfragmented reserve. Many countries will have 10, 20. That is a better scenario than having one or two national parks. Isolated reserve, like we said, a lot of people are now building a network. So how are they connected? You can have corridors that are maintained. A lot of states in the West would make sure maybe a drive between one state and another is a reserve. So both states share resources in terms of doing that, and that becomes a corridor. The Lagos Calabar coastal road that is being built can be a major corridor as we design a project like that. Imagine that you have a corridor of perhaps over 1,000 kilometers of protected area along that coastal route. That becomes an exciting place that I would want to visit and tourists want to visit. So those are some of the things you might need to consider. These are other options. We have situations where reserves are managed individually. Is it possible for us to manage them regionally? You have an irregular shaped reserve of 300 hectares. Why not have 300 hectares that is closer with fewer edges? That helps you manage better. So the whole idea would be we should have reserve networks. So we reserve networks. So protected land areas in the past distributed in a haphazard fashion. Distribution of people, of course, maybe when we're doing that in terms of where people were living, it was difficult for us to design properly. But we should be able to think in ways that we can improve linking new areas to those reserve networks. And a key factor to account for design locations is making links to existing protected areas to create a reserve network. So any new protected area shouldn't be in isolation. A reserve network. There can be physical links or a functional link. A network protecting representative of all major ecosystems in a region or country, inclusive of those affected and unaffected by human activity. And one way to do this is to do what we call analysis. What is available, what is not available, and this is based on the analysis. And it works by comparing biodiversity priorities. Governments will be involved, and they will compare with existing and protected areas. And then we can also found in this analysis, so fill in those gaps. There are 6 analyses. You find species, mandates, and insist you, and then you try to you determine which priority is protected and which is not protected. And then you identify areas identified to fill the gaps. Additional areas are acquired, and then you design a management plan to establish the areas to be filled. And then the new areas are monitored to determine whether they are meeting your goals for conservation. If they are not meeting your goals, you change them with additional areas acquired. So it's more of an agile way of planning and management. You observe and then you change or tweak to fit exactly what you want. But it starts from identifying gaps within a country or a region. The question is, if you have established something, a habitat or an ecosystem, and you have brought in all you need to, do you still need to manage it? Do you need to be why not just allow nature just do what it's meant to do? So the common misconception is that once a protected area is designated, you don't have to bother again. But the reality has shown that when these parks or these areas are left unmanaged, a number of species rapidly decline. And the reason is that, of course, when you don't manage a place, human activity increases. If I just establish the Kyogen cattle ranch or one park somewhere, and I'm not there, the people would walk in and do what they want to do. They would hunt, they would log, and so it's important that management and monitoring comes in. So species also depend on human management, especially grazing. Human activities can also bring about changes in we don't leave these things unmanaged. Management can also cause habitat deterioration. So, for example, in national park, we could say, okay, let's remove top predators. Let's remove falling trees or hollow trees. In all those things, or we're trying to suppress fires. Those also can cause. So, management has to do with observation, not for the sake of management, but using research. So, the most successfully protected sites are sites that use scientific research and monitoring to determine what the strategies for that management should be. And that also has to do with understanding the species, the goals of that particular area. And typically, smaller reserves require more management than larger ones because they are basically surrounded by developed land. So imagine very large reserves. They require control to hunting, a number of visitors, and how frequent can you prevent things like burnings. So there's no special way to say this is the way to manage. It depends on the size, the structure, what are the objectives of conservation, and what is the social context in that area. Those are the things you need to consider before you design something that is specific for that particular area. Keys to major functions is important for biodiversity. If you establish a conservation area or a protected area, you would be interested in finding out what are the water levels in streams, in ponds, what are the number of individuals of your herbs, your shrubs, and your trees. And the methods you would use are mainly observations, surveys, photographs, interview with park users, and you can also monitor the social environment. What are the changes in social and economic environments and how they interact with the park. When you watch documentaries, you would see the lot of work that goes into and the methods of observations, of surveys, of the photographs and the videos they are taking. This type of information is needed. The type of information you need depends on the goals of that park management. Monitoring can also determine health of the park and also suggest which management practices are working and which are not. So you learn as you monitor, and then you can investigate by doing controlled experiments. And then when you get data, it helps you to change your management, to adapt your management to suit what you have learned. And this data is also needed to demonstrate money being spent, making a difference. And so if you just establish a park, you're paying salaries, and no data is being produced, you don't encourage funders to come back and support you. But when you have documented data from your observations, from your surveys, photographs, and all that, you are more likely to have people feel that the money is being spent are justified. For very large parks, you can also use remote sensing, where you have maybe sensors. You can see the National Geographic would have darts that are thrown at animals, and those become like camera eyes for the documentaries. So remote sensing can involve using sensors across the park to just find information. And then reports of studies conducted on similar sites can also be useful. Similar sites in this case are sites that mimic that particular environment being studied. And so you can use that as a baseline for a data source. And so in terms of identifying and managing threats, we are looking at exotic or invasive species, low population size as the rare species, habitat destruction can be a threat, habitat degradation, fragmentation, human activity, acid rain, water pollution, climate change. These are all factors or threats in terms of the environment. And these pictures show that the first picture here shows, or the three pictures here show three types of habitat loss. In the first place here, you have a complete destruction, or we have a significant horrible effect on the animals there. The second one shows a habitat that has been degraded. When you move, especially across Africa, around the sea, where you have lots of population in cities, you are going to see a lot of this degradation. And then fragmentation as well. You can see uneven fragmentation in this place, as shown in the third picture there. You need to manage exotic and invasive species. Here, unchecked entire species or communities can be eliminated. The invasive exotic species must be vigorously removed while at low density. And then the methods of control involve maybe for animals poisoning, shooting, capturing and preventing reproduction. For plants, where you have invasive species, almost like weeds, you remove them, you use herbicides, you burn, you mow, you graze. And so we need to think in terms of, if you have an exotic species, how do I handle it in a place like this? Many species require specific habitats. These habitats don't spring into existence or remain unchanged over time. Sometimes human activity has created the habitats, or it has occurred naturally as one of the stages of succession. In the next slide, we'll be able to see different stages of succession. And so to maintain the species, human management is often required to maintain habitat, and this could include agriculture, grazing, mowing, clearance or controlled fire setting to achieve a required successional changes or stage. And so what usually happens is you have maybe a virgin land, maybe destroyed by fire, and then you decide, okay, let me plant annual crops, and then you plant crops that need 3 to 4 years to grow and all of that. So there's usually a succession when there are stages of succession in a vegetation. So in small parks, these succession stages may occur in nature, naturally. For example, in a forested area, early successional species may not be present and will have to be introduced by human action. Where old growth species need to be maintained, human where old need to be maintained, human and natural disturbance, including fires, need to be eliminated. So you have communities where some trees are well over 200 years old. For those kind of communities, you would need to make sure we don't have any fire and all of that. And so this is the succession or stages of succession that you can typically find in a system. So 2 years, you plant your pioneer species within a year, grasses and perennials within 3 to 4 years. And then you move into the intermediate species, grasses, shrubs, pines, young oak, and hickory for 5 to 150 years. And then your mature oak and hickory forests, 150 years and beyond. And so these are the stages that you can find in secondary succession. So if forest fire happens, you need, there's a regeneration at the level of the climax community. So this land now passes through different types of habitats during the process of regeneration. A typical example is the chalk grassland in the UK. It's an area of land that is protected due to the species of the white flowers that are grown, as you can see in this picture. The management of the grassland is required. Species abundance greatly affected by the nature of the management. So here, the management comes in with all the data to see how they can preserve these wild flowers. And then the reality is, if there's no management, outcomes will be completely different, and it will depend on whether grazing, mowing, or burning is used, the time of the year of the management, the amount of fertilizer applied, whether management carried out continuously, annually, or rotationally. So this is a typical example of what we've been talking about. For management of water, water bodies, rivers, lakes, swamps, they need a good supply of clean water to maintain ecosystem. We're talking of population of fishes, amphibians, waterbirds, aquatic plants, and other species. If we look at River Benue today, you can imagine how much we are protecting it with the sort of pollution we have year in, year out from all the riverine areas. So if you have pollution, you have competing demands for agriculture, residential, and industrial uses. These are all threats to water supply if you are deciding on managing the ecosystem within water bodies. An obvious strategy to protect these wetlands and water bodies to include the entire catchment in a protected area. This problem might be caused at the head of the watershed, but the problems can also be experienced at the lower end. We've had several of sort of issues where water is released from the dam up in Cameroon, and then you have a lot of flooding, and that affects our water quality. So measuring water quality is a critical requirement. And secondly, we also need to work on how we can also manage our upstream communities and prevent threats to the downstream community. This is a case study of Ethiopian lowland. It's something you should also look at, and this will help you understand the entire ecosystem is this water source. What are keystone resources? These are resources, critical resources that species depend on to survive. And so you need to have a plan to be able to provide those resources if you want your vegetation or your site to be sustainable. We can have examples like food, fruit trees, pool of water available during dry season, exposed mineral leaks. In smaller parts, it is sometimes necessary to manage these keystone resources to ensure that they can sustain a desired population of species, where this target population is larger that could be sustained naturally. The question is, how are these resources being enhanced by the management? If you have a place where you have a low water level, can you create artificial ponds? Can you plant fruit trees? Can you bring artificial feeding points for like bed tables, nesting sites? Next post is clearing away bushy vegetations from pond edges so that you can enhance these resources to be available for the species. The reality is, without such management, the resident population may become too small to persist. And that is a sort of intervention. And it also comes from data. How you need to identify what the keystone resources are, what species are you even dealing with before you now come to the point of what are the keystone resources. And a balance must be struck between establishing a nature reserve free from human influence and intervening to maintain a larger population. The whole idea is to manage a larger species. So we need to be able to come to a compromise. It's also very important that we manage people. By managing people, we talk of taking people along, convincing them of the need for, because at the end of the day, if people don't buy into whatever you are saying, it wouldn't work. And so a policy has to do a lot of stakeholder engagements so that you can identify what are the threats to the integrity of biodiversity within a particular park. Examples of policy permissions that cause the greatest threats are land development projects like roads and dams, extractive activities like mining, prospecting, and exploration. If we have a huge forest to protect and we wake up today and realize that we have discovered crude oil in Benue, would we decide to say, okay, this is going to make more money for us as a community? So those are the sort of things we need to think about. Hostility towards protection by residents may be caused by loss of access. If you choose to establish a park in an area where people use those resources for hunting, for firewood, without managing their expectations and creating alternatives to them, you will definitely have hostility from that communities. People formerly living off of the land will suffer great loss if they are suddenly denied access. It's the same thing we are talking of here. Losers not likely to support the conservation goals of the area. So if I feel that hunting is my profession and there's no alternative, and I'm not carried along, I'm definitely going to fight that. Armed soldier patrols are needed to prevent locals from engaging in destructive actions. So you also need to engage. I think we've just started the forest guards in Nigeria. I think the core objective should be to protect our forests, not necessarily fighting violence. But I think where we are now, we need to do both. It is critical to allow input from all stakeholders, carry everybody along, let them know the real reason why we are doing this, the long-term impact, let them have a buy-in. And ideally, the locals should be involved in park management and planning. So they are trained by the park, they are employed. So they have an alternative means of livelihood. Local support park when they see that their livelihoods are protected by biodiversity conservation through wildlife tourism. and which can also support the management, provide income to live for employed locals, and they'll compensate locals for loss of income from the use of the park. Success can also breed problems. When you have success, migrants will come in and start claiming land that belongs to locals or form parts of parks. Likely have no knowledge or respect for local traditions, so no experience or desire to work with local communities. So we've had these sort of issues where you say these are the original owners of the land, but because of success, a lot of people have come in, and this can bring some sort of clash. The central tenets of protected area management plans are statements on who can use what resources. In communities where maybe hunting is most important to them, you can create an area and say, okay, these are the areas that this activity is allowed. If it is for grazing, it's a community where grazing is important. You can create an area where you say, okay, this is an area, and if you go across that area, you will be fined. And then there has to be an enforcement of that. You can create zones to separate conflicting demand. I think that's what we just talked about. And other reasons that we can use to create zones is to recover an engendered species. So you have a large area and you decide, okay, I'm going to just have this small portion of this area to recover some endangered species you have recognized, or you're trying to restore a degraded habitat, or you can choose to have a zone for just scientific research. In parks, you can come in sometimes and say, this area is not accessible. That's a zone you have created for something you want to do. And sometimes it can be a zone where no human access is allowed, even as much as quiet walking. Maybe you are trying to do some studies of that and you don't need any interference. But again, if you don't want public opposition, you need to explain what you are doing and then negotiate a compromise. Enforcement will be key, and that would involve local involvement, publicity, education, clear warning signs, and visible enforcement. The Australian Great Barrier Reef has 2,300 kilometer long, and it is 400 kilometer wide. So imagine, I think the distance between the north and Lagos should be about 1,300. So imagine the Australian Great Reef has a length of 2,300 kilometers and about 400 kilometers wide, and it is divided into 70 bioregions, separate area for different things, 80% for fishing, research, and so on and so forth. So that's quite a successful exhibition of zoning, where different things happen at different areas. And it's quite common in the West. The Australian is quite large, but you have the Canadian national parks between Alberta. That's almost 700 kilometers of different vegetations, lakes, artificial lakes, natural lakes, places for fishing and all of that. And that creates a lot of economic activities. Certain human activities incompatible with biodiversity should be regulated or abolished. This includes commercial harvesting of game or fish. We can allow this on a sustainable scale. So if you are going to hunt, I know the amount of animals I expect today, so I can designate a particular place for you. If you want to fish, there will be restrictions on what you can fish. It's not as much as you can. The problem is that locals do not accept restrictions, and they can access park areas when they are not on scene. And then you can have violence and breakout between hunters, fishermen, and park officials. So you need to look at that. In some cases, there can be intensive harvesting of natural plants. So you need to regulate those sort of activities. And then when you have national parks or parks that are that large, you are going to have issues with criminal gangs. Sambisa Forest today is a home for Boko Haram and other terrorists. So those are the practical issues you could have, but regular monitoring is needed to ensure overfishing and harvesting is not happening. Large-scale logging and farming can degrade and even eliminate entire or transform whole habitats. It must be stopped entirely. It's more difficult to stop activities of locals who depend on the park for livelihood. Fires, intermittent fires can also be beneficial. Some recreational activities could also be banned. And even these seamless activities like bench walking and must also be controlled to be able to maybe protect a particular habitat. Because human population is increasing, demand for access to wilderness areas and their resources are growing, and this must be managed. In developing countries, as populations and parks grow, this may lead to conflicts at times of economic stress. Resources in the park are seen as essential food and fuel for needy people. Conflicts may also occur when park animals or birds raid near agricultural land. We've had a lot of farmer header crises. So imagine birds also feeding on your crops. So effective park management requires that sufficient funding be available to allow for sufficient staff, proper training and equipping, appropriate buildings, communications, and other infrastructure. You also need a lot of money for awareness creation, stakeholder engagement. In many places, parks are severely underfunded, and this leads to understaffing and lack of equipment to patrol area. Now, what does success look like? Studies have shown that the most effectively protected areas had the greatest number of guards per unit area, clearly marked and maintained park borders, programs to compensate locals when animals or birds from park damage their crops. And then that if you have this sort of things to protect the locals, you're going to have a positive attitude towards parks from the locals and see some support. Studies of African tropical plants shows that successful conservation is linked to positive public attitudes, effective enforcement of park regulations, large park size, low human populations, and presence of conservation organizations at the park itself. And so for success to be built around Africa, we must develop positive public attitudes. We must empower enforcement of the regulations we have towards this park. The park has to be large, and then it should be sited around where you have low human populations. And we should also have a partnership with conservation organizations at the park itself. And that is the only way we can make some progress as far as preservation is concerned. Can we take some contributions, and then we're really way behind time. This, like I said before, when this lecture started, this is quite a large model. But the essence is not for us to teach everything, but to introduce you to basic concepts that you can do further study on when concepts are introduced. Look beyond the lecture slides and try and see how we can localize what is happening in our communities, observe, and it will be interesting to see, oh, this is what is happening here. I can see how do I, as an environmental expert, work around this issue? How do I play my own role in enlightening the people about what needs to be done? So if you have any questions or suggestions.
And raise your hand up, or so that you'll be given the floor to make your suggestion or ask question. Bashiru dropped a question. Muhammad Bashiru Okeme dropped a question. What could be the reasons for disappearance of vultures from our environment? Okay, Prof, are you there? Bashiru is asking a question. Comfort, you can unmute and speak. Oh, Comfort Oban.
Okay, good morning, sir. Mine is question. Thank you so much for this lectures. Sir, you have explained the causes of this climate change and some of this problem we are recently facing as a result of destruction of some of these natural resources. But in the case that some of these natural resources have gone, like I'm speaking from Abuja, like my area now, if you go there now, you can hardly even see a single tree there. So what's that? Is there any remedy that we can do? Because most of the times it looks very impossible for saying you are going to plant these trees again, because there's no even space. You see people building without even leaving single space there. So what is there any remedy that we can do to control this climate change? You can notice the weather is so very harsh. It's as a result of this. So that's my question, sir. Is there immediate remedy that we are going to do, maybe pending when there will be a better way for people to, or to create awareness for this environmental yes, sir, that's my topic. Thank you. That's my question. Thank you, sir.
Okay, sorry, I got thrown out for a bit. So I didn't really, I just met the last part of your question, but I think the question was more or less on how we can limit this drastic climate change we are experiencing, right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. This would happen on different levels, and that's why we all have a part to play. While we need to establish policies as a people, we need to also decide on our own that we have our own small role to play. So whatever activity you are involved in, how is it affecting the environment? It makes a lot of more sense if a country decides on its own to say, okay, these are the laws. I'll give you a typical example around the Western world. Every year, your car goes for an inspection, and that car, what you are just asking is even the next topic we'll be dealing with, policies in place, regulations in place. If that car has a higher emission from its exhaust, you cannot drive it again. That means it's more recent cars you will find in that environment. With that, you are stopping the emission of those gases that affect the ozone layer. But on the other hand, if you try that in Nigeria, it means you are sure 80 to 90% of people can't drive their cars.
Yes, that's true.
Because virtually all the public transport. So that becomes a challenge. On our own, as people, how do you deal with your own waste? On our own as a people, how much of, I mean, if there's light, if it's not for how much how much it is costing us now for maybe to put on our power, we really wouldn't care about the environment, how we use our resources. So the whole idea is for us, how do we even deal with even our waste disposal? If we take pure water, do we look for a proper place to even dispose of it?
Okay.
So it has to do with more of awareness of the things that cause these conditions. Even they like I said in the last class, is about a systems thinking, and everybody has a role to play. How are we bringing up our children to make sure that the environment is important, while we look at government to solve the issues we need to solve? How are we as individuals caring enough about the environment to say, this activity I want to do, how can I preserve the environment? I think that's the little we can do on our own. As experts, as graduates, as students, we can start raising awareness on our social media and enlightening people on the things they can do to be able to help the environment. So we all have a role to play, but we must be committed to those rules while we, again, there's also a lot of politics, and I think this is a question. The materials are just so much, but I would have wanted a situation where you'll be surprised that many of these things we are discussing today, we really don't believe in it. So it's difficult. A lot of us are doing this because, oh, it's a free master's degree program. I will do it. But in terms of implementation, we really don't care. Even as I sit here, there are a lot of things that if government is spending a lot of money on, especially when it comes to environment, I would say it's not a priority now, even though I believe in environmental sustainability. And the typical example is the Western world basically polluted the world with industrialization. Africa is not one of those places where we have contributed so much to the environmental issues we have at the moment. And that's why countries like China are not that committed to this, because as far as they are concerned, I don't need to be spending our hard-earned money on saving the environment now as against taking 600 million people out of poverty. So in reality, are we really committed to this, the effects environmental degradation is having on the climate. So it's a difficult place to be, but I would say it's more or less playing our own small roles in whatever ways we can because we want to live sustainable and actually believe in it and be conscious about the choices we make.
Okay, thank you
Okay,
so
there are a few
much
questions.
for the response. Yes, I think when we start doing it ourselves, if you do, your neighbor does the same thing, the next one, and then I think there will be changes. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, I'm trying to. Sorry, just give me a second. I lost the network on my. Okay, while I try to get network on my laptop, I think there's a question here. What can be done about takeover of green areas, wetlands, and parks from our urban centers like Makurdi by developers? Children's recreational parks around Makurdi town has instance become drinking joints or bars. That's an interesting question here. And here it depends more on government. And even individuals can also create parks and children and earn money from even what happens. But I think a few of us here, I hope that we get into politics and we decide to say, okay, we want to make a change um, as people in government. One of the things this project has also done is we have tried to also engage government officials in trainings. As we speak, we are currently running trainings for just civil servants or focus on civil servants. What we at IPES have done is our face-to-face trainings are strictly for civil servants at the moment. And the idea is if they are able to go through short courses that demonstrate how important these things are, they should be able to suggest, because at the level of budgeting, they usually are the ones to contribute. And they can say, oh, for the past how many years or in the last 1 decade, we haven't done this. This is what we need to do. We also have executive trainings. As we speak, we are planning a training for local government chairmen in procurement leadership, environmental sustainability, and all of that. So we're hoping that a lot of these things is more advocacy, enlightening them. Unfortunately, where we are from, a lot of officials are not committed to our well-being. So it's quite a challenge. But we can only hope that some changes are brought to pass. But at the end of the day, it just depends on those in government and with the will to say, yes, we want to make a difference. We'll go into the next module, and this is on how we can use policy, human activities, how we can use policies and sustainably develop ways we can ensure that our the desires we have for environment can be supported by policy. Human economic activity is damaging the environment, we agree. So the challenge for a typical policymaker is on what basis are environment protection policies made? We have the environment, we have the social aspect, and we have the economic aspects of development.
The network has not been very fantastic. Let's wait for Prof. I think the network kicked him out.
Yes, I'm back now. I'm trying to set up, get the network on my laptop so I can share the presentation. Okay, so basically, we're looking at what are the practices, what are the policies we can adopt. Like the last question that was asked about parks in Makodi. The question should be, we have identified an issue with respect to parks within urban areas. But imagine that the government now decides that to say, oh, we need to have at least 3 parks in any major town in Benue. That's a policy that is made now to protect the environment. In the case of having drinking joints in those places, those enterprises, they are focusing more on the economic aspects of what they are benefiting economically, and they are leaving the social aspect out. So there has to be a balance. Typically, to make that change, there should have been an environmental, social, and impact assessment. And if we come up with studies that say that children are not able to develop well And therefore, those studies have shown that we need to create playgrounds for them and all of that. We can now measure it with the economic value, the drinking joint we provide, or an event venue we provide, and look at the environmental. So if you look at both the social and environmental, you now create something that is sustainable. It is equitable, it is bearable, it is also viable. If the problem was those parks were not viable, you look at ways in which you can bring a balance to it. The problem is that environmental policies generate benefits in some areas and losses in some areas. How do policymakers understand and weigh these traits and make the right choices? And so a set of principles is usually developed, a framework within which each policy can be designed. And some principles relate to environment, others broader social issues. And so in this model, we'll talk of the growth of environmental awareness, introducing sustainable practices, looking at the historical development, description of each principle, the use in policy and the limitations. For this particular lecture, we might not be able to finish it. It's quite a large one. Then the next lecture, we'll talk of international, particular more the history and cause of awareness, familiarity with the principles underpinning successful environmental policies, who understand the negative consequences of ignoring these principles, understanding our policy was understand available money, the environment, and cleaning up this particular lecture. While still how the international netting that sorry, I'm still having this network challenge. In terms of the growth of environmental awareness, current levels of environmental awareness is new. It has been developed incrementally in the last 70 years. A number of different drivers. The first changes to environmental awareness occurred in the West. The Western countries, US, Europe, and several other countries in the West. And that's why they have made so much progress, because they had a head start on all other parts of the world. And these are some events that led to this awareness, this conscious efforts to take care of the environment. The testing of atomic weapons in New Mexico in 1945, the London smog of 1952. I think what we would remember most is the 110 for those who are young, deep water horizon platform and explosion in the Gulf of Mexico, where towns were wiped out by a major explosion on oil platform. We should, you can see 119,000 crude was spread over the UK coast in 1967. And you can imagine what effects it will have. A similar example would be what happened in Ogoniland and most of the Niger Delta. These sort of effects are things that make a country decide to say, okay, let's take this a lot more seriously, but internationally, these were the events that shaped our current and focus on how them to uh, the first one is side is 1962 of human rights comes F
Okay, Prof, you are back.
also better than the first environmental campaigning groups. So a lot of groups started coming up in terms of we need to defend the environment. We have the Environmental Defense Fund. We have the Greenpeace of 1970. We also have Friends of the Earth in 1971 and Earth Life Africa in 1988. So you can see when Africa started as 1988, environmentalist politics. Yeah, these are parties that have some sort of influence. It's not just about because uh, people realize that, for example, the current parties we have in Nigeria. How many of you think you can join the party and start telling party the environment is important? So they also form parties. So you have Green Party across different countries. They might not win at the national level, but they have a platform to speak about the environment. So, for example, if our democracy was functional, and you decide to run under a new registered party called the Green Party or the Green Revolution Party, and you win a chairmanship election in your local government, the next 3 years or so, you are able to make some stuff impacts done. And we have the Green Party, or should I say the Green Party, yes, and all other environmental safeguard parties in more than 80 countries as we speak. They are quite popular amongst the young people. So in terms of environmental principles, the 6 core environmental principles, this ecological sustainability, polluter pays principle, meaning if you have an industry and you decide to have emissions that affect the environment, you are going to be paying for it. So you need to think of, for example, the typical one we talk in Nigeria is the glass flaring by companies in the Niger Delta. We come to Benue State. There's a lot of waste from the Dangote cement. So if a fine is given to a company that decides to pollute, that's a principle you could use. Precautionary principle, what can we do? Those are the things we discussed the immediate past, just before we started this class. You can start, okay, these are the things I need to do to prevent this from happening. Equity. Has to be some sort of justice, human rights, public participation. The first three deal directly with the environment, and the other ones deal with the wider social application. Are my rights being trampled? If we have a local park in our community, and a few people who have money to drink are turning it into a joint, and my rights are being trampled, I can say my kids don't have access to. So those are the sort of social applications you can look at in terms of the last three principles. Ecological sustainability and limits to growth. In terms of historical developments, in the late 60s and 70s, scholars began to think about finite nature of the Earth's ecosystem in terms of how it might limit economic growth. We mentioned the limits of growth in the lecture last year, an MIT study. And the prediction is that the Earth systems will be unable to cope with population pressure by the mid-21st century. And this will be basically due to environmental burden caused by food production, industry, resource depletion, and waste disposal. If we look at oil in Nigeria, at the rate at which we're forgetting about it and focusing on oil, I think the model says in the next 100 years we will oil because what we have oil depots of water, spin of media, and so we think of sustainable don't that, then what happens? You need Venezuela to stay and so community. Like the okay, network is really horrible today. So, like we were saying, the optimists believe that technological changes can make a difference. And that's why a lot of focus is now on recycling, finding further supplies of resources or surplus. But we should also, this thing we are talking about the environment. People say economic growth is needed to alleviate poverty. So at this point, well, they're not really interested in what we do to the environment. So countries like China will tell you, look, you had your years of industrialization, you developed your community, your nations. Now that is our chance to take hundreds of millions of people out of the poverty you want to limit. So those are some of the different counter arguments. for optimists, they believe that 100% recycling is not possible 100%. Of the objections to the optimist, that even technology or increased scale would overwhelm gain. Economic growth alone not eliminate poverty. Overall, was optimist, but is economic modeling, and it is a current position that has emerged where we are saying some kind of sustainable development, and that's why you have things like the sustainable development goals. In the 1980s, yeah, this idea of sustainable familiar
Sir, we can't hear you, sir.
economy.
Can't hear you at all.
Through use of technology and change. Hello.
No, sir, not very well. The network is doing a slow motion with your voice, sir.
Okay, let me try and disconnect and come back again.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me now? Is it clearer now?
It's better, sir.
Okay. Okay, and so it's believed that we can use technology to uh, promote economic growth that does not cause environmental degradation. Like what flare oil and all of that. In the West, they would insist that you create a technology that doesn't have that adverse effects on the environment. Unfortunately, these ideas have little impact on the public or governments, especially at the national level. So if, for example, we just discovered oil and we are trying to make money off oil, and it's going to be more expensive to use technology that will cause degradation, you will have some countries decide, I don't need that. My policies, it's just about taking my own people out of poverty, or it might even be just corruption. And so the challenge becomes how to convince national governments to adopt it so that we play our own role in sustaining the environment. And the key to this is technological changes and allowing more efficient use. A notion called ecological carrying capacity. What is the capacity of that environment to carry degradations? The notion of limits to economic growth is in retreat, but the related measure of ecological carrying capacity has not. And what is carrying capacity is how many species or members of species can a fixed area of a habitat sustain. before environmental degradation occurs? And the answer to this question actually depends on what are the requirements of that population, what are the requirements of that species, and what is the state of the resources. One or more of these resources we're talking about, including renewable resources, can be overexploited. So we need to sit down and say, okay, if, for example, oil, we are taking out 2.2 million barrels per day, is it sustainable considering the amount of people we have and who would have in the next 100 years? So we would now think of the ways to use these resources so that they are not overexploited. Some countries even have some resources that they have chosen not to exploit at the moment. So it involves sustainable planning, sustainable thinking to say, okay, this is what we have. This is the resource requirements of this. These are the state of the resources. We will plan, especially for renewable resources. We would use it in a way that our kids will still enjoy the world. In terms of human carrying capacity, it is the maximum rate of resource harvesting and waste generation, that is the maximum load that can be sustained indefinitely without progressively impairing the productivity and functional integrity of relevant ecosystem wherever the latter may be located. And so when we are estimating human carrying capacity, full human needs must be accounted for, not just subsistence. An average human is consuming more resources each year, and the environment is required to carry not only more humans, but humans with a larger resource footprint. And this leads to the next debate. Is there an upper limit to human carrying capacity? Again, it is answered in different ways by the different schools of thought. The optimist is saying no. Technological innovations will increase the carrying capacity through use of synthetic fertilizer to increase food, fiber, and fuels. And so, as we improve in technology, we should be able, the population should be able to, the resources should be able to carry the population. The pessimist is saying the new technologies themselves you are talking of have a footprint and resources. New technologies reducing resources, reduces costs, creating greater demand for the products they produce. And that also brings us to, if you say, okay, let me not use crude oil, for example, I will use bio fuels. Again, how you take away from the plant? One has the right to their opinions, but somehow we need to sit down and have these conversations and decide what is best. But the most important thing, as you see, is there has to be a thought about which world do we want to live in the next 50 to 100 years. Chambers in the year 2000 argues that our dominant cultures continues to celebrate expansion in spite of this heavy toll on people and nature. In fact, we desperately try to ignore that much of today's income stems from liquidating our social and natural assets. We fool ourselves into thinking that we believe we can disregard limits indefinitely. And so it's still the same argument of people saying, oh, let's take as much as we can. But the fact is, our future and natural assets are worth the things we are going to be losing in the long run. The inverse of carrying capacity, which is ecological footprint. It's a quantitative assessment of the biologically productive area, the amounts of nature required to produce the resources, food, energy, and materials, and to absorb the waste of an individual city, region, or country. So as we develop economically, we produce way more waste. What is our capacity to absorb this waste as an individual? What is our capacity to absorb this waste, either by recycling or disposal in a sustainable way in a city, region, or country? That is what we call our ecological footprints. And the reality is, if our footprints exceeds available lands, resources used faster, resources are then used faster that can be renewed, and degradation occurs. What are the pros? Crops for food, feed, fiber, oil, rubber. Animals for meat, milk, hides, and wool. Timber grown for wood, fuel, and fiber. Fish for food. Infrastructure for housing, transport, industry, hydroelectric power, carbon dioxide released from burning fossil fuel. These are simple, accessible measures of ecological sustainability, and they can be used alongside our economic measures like the GDP. Resource use of different populations can be compared, and unsustainable footprints can be identified. So if we look at all these things we utilize for our economic growth, our survival, we can look at how these things are depleted and how we're able to still have them as we're using them in a sustainable way to see whether this works or not. When it comes to the cons, it's just a partial measure of sustainability alone. It reduces value of land to productive capacity and ignoring ecological value. And I mean, how much, especially in Africa, are we talking of toxic pollutants, species extinction, scarcity of different types of lands? We have loamy soil, clay soil, and all of that. Whether the land is sustainable, when the land is used sustainably or not, location of any overshoot, exhaustibility of non-renewable resources use, social issues like income distribution, unemployment, the quality of life of the people producing the footprints, and potential future use of technology for faster extraction of or greater efficiency. So the sustainable principle and policy raises awareness that economic activities require natural resources. Natural resources needs to be protected. Is the justification of partial or least for all environmental policy? Should it guide in the thinking of our policymaker designing both environmental and economic development policies? Is it fully reflected in policy? Environmental degradation would decrease in theory. The most fundamental of the principle is, are we there yet? And so in terms of how we can look at our individual footprints in terms of how our global footprint is increasing, there was a study in the year 2000, current growth in population, and it's saying that we're really overshooting our use of resources, and it is showing in the degradation of resources. In 2005, again, UN MEA forecast said consumption will likely increase between 3 to 6 folds by the year 2050. The question will be, how will the resource requirements of this growth be met if we're already overshooting and consumption is most likely to be 3 to 6-fold in the next 23 years or 24 years? Will rich countries simply outcompete poor countries for resources? Another idea here is saying ecological sustainability must replace economic growth as the principle of economic objective in the future. So where we have found ourselves, it's a place where we have different goals by different national governments. Most of the developed worlds are passionate about developing their countries in a sustainable way. But the countries, the third world countries, the middle countries have also adopted part of what the first world wants. But we as a people, if you are stopping us from using our resources sustainably, if you are stopping us from using our resources the way we want because you feel needs of our citizens, our communities. So that's the challenge we have. And that is why we have those who are pessimists, those who are believe that really this also creates a disadvantage to us who have not grown industrially yet. And I would end this part of the lecture. Yes, we are environmental specialists, or we're aspiring to be environmental specialists. If you have a choice in your states, for example, we have a governor at the moment, and we want him to set up 50 to 100 industries. And those industries will create jobs for virtually every young person to be employed in the States. And there is the counter argument that if he creates these industries at the rate at which he wants to create these industries, there will be adverse effects or further adverse effects on our communities. What would be your opinion? Forget the fact that in ideal situation, you would say, yes, I'm an environmental scientist, I'm an expert, I would advise that this is to happen. But in reality, what would be your position? Would you prefer he does that and take maybe 70 to 80% of the populace out of poverty? And your argument can be that, yes, the West has done their part of messing up the environment, and they are a civilized society. So why can't we also have the chance? In the first place, the main issues we have in the environment that has to do with climate change don't even come from Africa. We don't contribute that much. So what would be your place in that? And I'm optimist. So maybe I would take a few reactions, and then we will continue later in the afternoon. Let me have anyone an opinion on this. Raise your hands, and then we can discuss. Okay. Agba Ben, please. Okay. Agba Ben Steven, can I have your comments? If it's not available, Jibril Adamu. Okay, can the admin please unmute speakers? Let's just have one or two comments before we take a break. Hello, are we here?
Okay, good morning, sir. Good
Good
morning,
morning, please.
class. Yes, personally, now let me speak as someone who is not in the field or in the practice. I have this personal belief that we all as humans should have the ability and the capacity to be self-sustaining, to carry out projects that will make us independent. So back then in school, we had this lecturer, a professor of hydrology. He would tell us, his name is Professor Gilbert Okechukwu. He would tell us climate change is a hoax. As a professor of hydrology, this man would tell us the Western world want to just they've achieved the highest level of development. So one way they feel they can control the third world or the developing world is to retard their level or their speed of development in ways such as energy. You know, once you are able to control energy, you can control anything. So he gave us instances that, for instance, how many hectares of land would you require to construct a solar farm, for instance, capable of supplying enough power to some of these industries? It is capital intensive and the efficiency is not there. The technology is still not even very ripe or economically feasible for us. But fossil fuel, which is crude, and we have it in abundance, it's the major way most of these Western world got developed to this stage. So he will say these are just um, ways the West want to control us, control what we can produce, so that when a day comes, it gets to a point they will tell us, "Don't worry, you don't need to produce. We'll produce and we'll be sending down to you." What if a day comes and maybe there are certain policies they want us to implement? Let's use the LGBTQ, for instance. When we refuse, then they will cut supplies. We can see what is happening on the global stage. Recently, I learned USA has been pressuring India to stop the purchase of energy from Russia. You can see these are the same countries telling countries like India not to produce energy. Now you have issues with Russia. You are telling India not to purchase or you will sanction them with tariffs and all of that. So you see, at the end of it all, are these guys really sincere about the sustainability we talk about? Let me not speak for too long, but if I am not going to speak as an environmentalist, I will say truly, sir, it's more like a political um, it's more political than about the environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that beautiful contribution and being honest about it. Can we have Jibril? Jibril, please.
Okay. Good morning, Prof. Thank you for sharing the wealth of knowledge. Good morning, everyone. As we all believe, climate change isn't coming. Climate change is already here with us, and it's either we act now or we watch our ecosystem crumble around us. So there is a spatial temporary analysis that was carried out in Benue State and in Nasarawa State, and a heavy dialogue was held at Nasarawa State in Taal Conference Hotel Lafayette. So, and the presenter stated that there are some crops that will not be sustainable in 50 years coming due to erratic rainfall. So my question is, how can we manage this erratic rainfall? Because he stated that some of those crops like maize will not be sustainable when that time comes. That's the question, sir.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, Wange Tewasi Moses.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for the wonderful lecture. Mine is a contribution and also, secondly, a question. Before we close the other section, a sister asked a question. How do we limit climate change within our immediate environment here? So I was so much concerned with it. And she was looking for remediation strategy. And if we look at within our environment here, just as you say, awareness, and there has to be a kind of a mental change among all of us. I would also want to add to it that there are common activities that we can do at a less cost, like planting of trees around us. If you have a home, you should be able to plant a tree there, even if it is not your home. You are renting an apartment and there's a space there, you can plant a tree. Trees have a way of, checking out heat and also limiting the greenhouses green gases in the atmosphere that actually produce these high temperatures that result to some of these changes that we have within our environment. Well, we also have to look at some social factors embedded in our tradition, such as bush burning. We burn bush for food, we burn bush for this destroy biodiversity, and I believe that significantly also is affecting our environment. So we collectively, we have to limit bush burning activities. And I will bring up a story. I've been one of the proponents of environmental conservation. In the time past, if I was a student, if I take pure water, at the end of it, I will put it in my pocket if there is no waste disposal around. And the people around seem to look at me as somebody who is unusual. But I don't see myself polluting the very environment that I'm trying to protect. So these are some of the activities I've noted. But other strategies, they are very expensive, just like Prof has mentioned. The use of E90 fuel, that's from ethanol. We have a lot of cassava. We can encourage cassava mechanized farming, and that if government has the political will and the economic will to set up some of these or go into bilateral relationship or partnership with international partners, they can come and set up these internal plants that has a very efficient way of burning with limited greenhouse gases or other pollutants that cause mayhem in our environment. Then, that's my little contribution. My question is that you spoke about reserve areas for animals or for other biodiversity and all that. And having in view that in Africa here, there is hunger, there is poverty. And when we have these reserve areas for animals, there is tendency that poachers may invade these reserve or protected areas and kill these animals for their aesthetic or commercial values, and sometimes even for food. So what effective measure that is on ground to take care of these poachers that their activities is seriously affecting some of these protected areas? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to all the three speakers with questions and very wonderful contributions. The beauty of this is, like I said, we are creating a lot of awareness by this SPECI project where we can think for ourselves. Like you rightly said, the last speaker said, Wange said, we can play our own role in our small way. Plant a tree, buy less. If you don't necessarily need something, you don't have to, if you have so much money, you don't have to buy all the clothes you need to buy. You repair, you reuse, you recycle. You can use energy more wisely. There are LED bulbs now. In your own small way, you can have a small solar, so you don't rely on just try to use renewable energy. In the developed world, a lot of people who consciously decide that, okay, I want to contribute to the economy, they have decided to start using bikes or even walking or use public transports when it's possible than using their own personal cars. It's also very common now in the West to have what is called the carpool. So if I'm driving from one town to the other, I just pick 2 or 3 people instead of each person driving, and that is their own small way of contributing to the economy. You talked of planting of trees. Can we eat less meat? Can we use our voice? Sometimes we think that that is not important, but imagine the effect you have on your children in having science clubs that teach them these are the things to do. You'll be shocked that the generation we have now know absolutely nothing on what they need to do on the environment. So those are the little things we can do. But the most important thing is a mindset. And just like you rightly said, that is the first step. Now, to the other comments by who is that now? I can't remember the first speaker, where it is believed that the whole climate thing is a hoax. And it was counteracted by the opinions by Jibril and Damu. Now, the interesting thing is there has to be a balance in how we reason. When the West brings in these ideas, just like the Chinese are doing, the reality is the human nature is to take advantage of the next person. But what we need to do in Africa is develop the knowledge, and that's why you are here in this class. And then think for yourself and look at the best approach to it. While I recognize that these industrial activities will have an effect, but my priority at the moment is to enhance the livelihood of my people. So you would
definitely think in terms of the choices you make. I had an experience a few years ago, in 2015. Like I mentioned, my PhD is on producing biofuels, animal ethanol fuel from cassava. And I had the privilege of meeting the president of British Petroleum, which is Shell. He was the president in Asia Pacific, the whole of China and a few other countries. He has retired in his 60s. And I was trying to commercialize my research. It was just a chance meeting, and he just invited me for lunch, and he started asking questions. And when I told him, he said he leads a biofuel project at the Arizona State University. And that project, at the small scale it was already producing fuel for transportation within campus by buses. He was heading that project in the Arizona School of Sustainability, getting funding for it. And he told me something. He said, John, there is no way you can compete with fossil fuel. I worked with British Petroleum. Whatever prices you see now for crude oil, the oil industry produces at way lower costs. So if the prices of this new technology to produce biofuels, when you look at what the technology involves in producing, there is no way it can compete with crude. At the end of the day, he referred me to a few people at the federal government, at the level of the US. And they had a policy to support renewable energy and all of that. And they discussed it. They were so excited. A few weeks later, I got an email from one of the guys here. He said he was no longer interested in it because discussions with top people at the level of government are saying we are no longer pursuing that policy. So in as much as the US was projecting a policy of, but as a country, they had a different policy that is looking at the lives of the American citizens. And that is why Trump is very popular with the average person that is not educated. What I think we can do is, as a people, yes, even the SPECI project, there are those who say, at this point in our way, in the way we are developing, why are you bringing a project that costs over $140 million? Is that money, can't we use it to do other things? You are trying to let us feel that we should develop capacity in this. The Chinese will never spend money on projects like this. They will rather think of how they can construct the road between Abuja and Makurdi and Enugu. So in terms of we're taking loans to do, to allow people understand what to do in the environment, to do with procurement and social standards. The Chinese are not interested in that. So someone can even criticize the specific projects to say you are trying to divert our attention. Why? Let's focus on how we can build these roads instead of thinking of, because the cost will be increased. If you start saying, okay, I'm diverting this road because this particular cultural heritage will be destroyed, or this particular habitat will be destroyed, or for whatever reason. So there are those arguments. But the interesting thing is, knowledge is never wasted. Let's be enlightened about the effect of climate change. But as leaders, as experts, let's also develop our critical thinking at national, at subnational, to say, what are our priorities? If we decide to build, I started with a question, if we decide to say, let's have 50 industries, but someone is saying, no, if you have these industries, especially when it make sure they don't do this so that it doesn't affect the environment, you can come to a compromise to say, okay, I can do 40 and the remaining money for 10, I can decide to plant more trees. I can decide to do this, but we need to factor in our local realities, where we are economically, and take an informed decision. We're not saying, no, let's focus on just preserving the environment. A question came from Jibril on the effects of this climate change on planting in the next few years. we need to start thinking, how do we create artificial lakes? How do we plan such that our states are ready for these unforeseen things or these predicted events that will negatively affect our production? So the whole idea is just to broaden our minds, play our own role in our own small ways by being conscious of whatever we do to our environment. We have children. Instill in them. How many of us actually, yes, when we talk of morality, we do that. But how much consciousness do we promote in terms of how our children can see the environment? Do we take them for the tree planting? Do we let them know that, okay, this is what they need to do? So I hope that these lectures broadens our minds. You have a good network now of people you can discuss with. Let it not end as us just taking lectures, but these discussions should continue outside of class and see how we can have a better understanding and make informed choices. On that note, we'll end this lecture by this for this morning. We have extended by about 30 minutes. I have a meeting in the next 1 hour. It might spill into the next lecture time. So my suggestion is for us to start the afternoon lecture by 2 p.m. Because I don't know how long that meeting will last from 12. So that's my appeal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Back by 2 p.m.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Resume by 2 p.m.
Hello, Cosrep, please talk to
Thank
these
you very
people.
much, sir.
Cosrep, address this
People do
video.
video call. I hope nobody was naked, cool.
Please address this video.
Cost rep. So of all things, it was nakedness that your mind got.
That question I asked, so no person no
Now,
abuse
question
our
you ask now. Is it bad to ask question?
No, it's not bad though.
So if you
People are
ask
moving.
question now, give me answer.
No, nobody was naked, so but we'll address it. Let's try to offer a video anytime we are on call like this. They help save data for others and all of that.
Thank you, Machiwe.
But now Chibi on gone.
He's even addressing somebody on the road.
Addressing him here. Bye. Sorry,
It's okay. See you people by 2 p.m. Thank you.